So now we will not take too much of time. Depending upon how the audience wants this to run, we can actually wind up right now in 5 minutes. Or we can sort of continue with whatever slotted time and available time we have. And totally depends upon how interactive you'd like us to get. Because I certainly don't want to hold you guys back from the lovely, wonderful experience you'll have of the Delhi traffic while you're going back. So let's about begin. One of the areas that we've talked about and Praveen talked about, bringing to life the problems that we've faced all along. And we've known that there are these changes that are happening and the millennials are on their way and they're going to disrupt life as it was. The environment is changing better than and faster than what we can handle. It is bringing in new talents, it's bringing in new thinking, new competencies, etc., etc. But one of the very serious problems that real life faces in organizations, and I'm sure everyone here in this gathering knows all about it, is whether we are actually preparing ourselves for the competencies of the future. We've talked about tomorrow, we really want to talk about tomorrow. Unfortunately, most everybody talks about today, that these are the competency gaps, etc., and the future is pushed to the sidelines because we live the future when we accost it or when we come to it. Unfortunately, that's not likely to work. So one factor that we keep wondering for is that while we create organizations for the long term, we say that we want to create values for the long term and we want to give a sustainable benefit to our customers, etc., and thereby create value for the organization. I'm not too sure how ready we are, and I'm not too sure how clearly and precisely we assess what we really need. And these are the issues that we face. I mean, what is the gap that we need versus what we have? Now that we know that there is a particular gap, one of the questions is how do you assess the gap? And the second question that you assess is how do you fill the gap? To the best of us, we spoke about this in the morning about make or buy. What does make or buy for us mean? It means that if you have the time, you reskill, recompetize your entire team and make. But if you don't have the luxury of time and you don't know actually what's going to come by, you buy. You hire from outside. And sometimes it's very difficult. Say, for example, I'm going to take extreme examples. Let's say you believe that the competencies which are required today and in the future are cutting edge competencies. Let's say you want blockchain technology experts, blockchain scientists. Now blockchain scientists are just not available in the world outside. So whatever you may want to do, you are forced to create them from inside. That means you identify a bank of people and you invest in the bank of people and send them to reputed organizations to get trained in blockchain technology and become blockchain scientists. Now, whether you want to make or want to buy, you are forced to take the decision of make, because buying option is just not available. On the other extreme is, you want to create talent from your own organization, but you want to create talent when you're not confident enough that the people that you have available that you want to reskill or reprofile competency-wise, they are right fit for your new roles. And therefore, whether you like it or not, you're forced to buy. However, these two extremes need not necessarily be present all the time. It's always a continuum. And therefore, this conundrum about whether you should hire or you should, rescale, etc., etc. And finally, the third one, which always creates a problem is, yes, it's very easy to say you reskill, but how do you reskill effectively? What do you actually do to change the competencies of people who have not come with that kind of a mindset, who do not do that kind of a role, who've never even thought about themselves in different roles, but suddenly find themselves to be very out of place. And you're saying, no, don't worry, the world I know has changed, and therefore I'm going to reskill all of you, and you are going to start doing something completely different from what you've been doing till now. That's not so easy to do. I mean, you can have all the training programs in the world, it will fall flat. The guy just doesn't want to do it. given these things, and there are many other nuances to it, and given these things, there's always an issue about how to rescale. And this is where I want to actually ask this question. I'm sorry, I'm going to just stand up and walk around a bit to make everybody uncomfortable. So I want to know whether within this group of people that are sitting over here, do you face these challenges in your organizations? How do you rescale? How do you define competency gaps? You know, we call this a chasm between the required competency and the available competency. You need the world and you need the Everest, but all you have is this small inflatable boat which just won't even go. So, are there people who are willing to share? Do you have problems within organizations? Volunteers? Anybody? Anybody wants to share whether you have a problem within the organization? Yeah.
Sorry, I won't call it as a problem. I think it's, when you look back at talent, you are always looking at competency versus willingness. Is there a competency problem that the person does not want to do a certain job, or is it a willingness issue?
Skill, will.
Yeah, exactly. So what we try to do in our organization, and being a professional body ourselves, what we try to do is walk the talk of kind of throughout experiential learning. So for example, what I would do is call my team to Delhi from various parts of the country and get them into a one-day workshop where we're throwing knowledge which is more practical, get them to learn something which increases their willingness to be able to do the job effectively. So it's more on the will part that we're trying to work on, so that effectively they are also nurturing the skills.
Yes, sir.
I have just another dimension to add to what he's saying. I think I will talk about some of our past experiences. There has been organizational resistance also to make that possible. So if I say that, you know, let's create a training path to move from this role to this role, you know, people say, अगर तू ये करेगा तो बाकी लोग क्या कहेंगे, वो upset हो जाएंगे, ये वो, you know, let's do it from outside. So there has been organizational resistance also that's, you know, that's come into place.
We'll come to that. It's a fantastic thing you brought up, Trini. Absolutely. Any other quick inputs before I pass the buck on to the two experts on the panel?
All right, this session has to be driven by the audience. Please understand. Yeah.
Yep, Nikhil. Yes, ma'am.
One person going ahead with a lot of roles.
The mic's not on, please.
The issue is that
It's still not on.
Can you place it a little closer, ma'am?
yeah.
Yeah.
The issue is that there is one person who is taking the multitasking and is acting as a bottleneck and stopping the other departments to work. So how do we go about and make the changes?
Oh, okay. Fair point. Absolutely. Okay. So let's try and see what the experts have. You know, Dipender comes from a purely human or people-intensive organization. This is an organization which is totally dependent upon the skill and competency of its people. You know, BPO or BPM organizations don't necessarily use anything else except the intellect power of the people. However, that is rapidly changing now. And let's talk about Dipender. Do you want to share about? So, a couple of things that I want to know about. First, do you see competency gaps within the required and available competencies? And if you do, how do you manage those gaps? What do you and don't feel restrained about your current job? I mean, any previous experience helps.
So this is a conundrum that we've been facing not for 1 year, 2 years, but almost for the last, this entire industry has been facing that for the last 20 years. There is always a gap between what we as an organization need to deliver to the customers, because the customers are already ahead of the curve. They know what they want. And what we are able to supply, or what we are able to effectively deliver, I'm not saying supply, what we are able to effectively deliver, there is a gap. And we know that, you know, there is a lot of things that we have to move ahead on. We tried to see whether it's a problem which is there within us. Are we moving fast enough? And we thought that let's look at whether our competitors in India are facing something similar. Yes, they were. Then somebody told us that, look, you know, you're doing a lot of stuff in India. It might be good for you to go closer to your customers in the United States or United Kingdom or Australia or any other part of the world and try to deliver things from there. Maybe you'll be faster or you'll be able to deliver more, better or effectively. And what do we see? There's a skill gap as a country in the United States. There's a skill gap in UK. There's a skill gap in Australia. There's a skill gap in Singapore. So these skill gaps are not just limited to an organization. It's into an industry, it's into an ecosystem, and into an entire country per se. And these are not easy gaps to fulfill. It takes a lot of time to fulfill. And what really makes a difference between a successful organization or a successful country or a successful industry is not just about what you have today or what you don't have today. It's what you are able to deliver, and that delivery is primarily coming from people. So I think, yes, to answer your question, it's something which is keeping all of us sleepless at night, and we know that we have to do much more than what we are doing.
Absolutely. Nikhil,
Yeah.
I know that you've done so much of stellar work in the skill development and competency development, and in fact, even in assessment stage, you have done a lot of work. You want to share some of your experiences around that?
Yeah, so many times, I agree actually with the audience. Some of you shared that organizational resistance is something very critical. We have observed, so we do a lot of consulting, with the corporate world. So there is a huge, organizations, sometimes people are looking for the, skill upliftment, but they are not able to do it because of organizational challenges. And I want to share, some interesting data with all of you, if you allow me, that World Economic Forum in 2018 did a survey in Indian market, and they shared that 83% of the organization are looking to automate their work. 83%. So imagine what will happen to the employees. Then 79% of the organization wants to retrain their employees, and 78% of the organization want to hire a new permanent staff with skills relevant to new technologies. So I think so it's a very important data. So therefore, actually, I agree with you, sir, a lot that as a country, at a macro level and as an organization, we need to invest in our employees. We need to train our employees. We need to skill the. So and before that, prior to that, we should understand what is the future. As Sanjay ji was saying, has started the conversation. What is the future? What is tomorrow? What does tomorrow means for for us? What is it that skills which are required for us to understand? So with that, in that report, they shared that the emerging skills by 2022 will be analytical skills and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, creativity and initiative, critical thinking and analysis, and complex problem solving. So imagine we have to be future ready. In the previous one, Mr. Purang said that we need to be future ready, but we should know where to go. What is the road ahead? So the entire ecosystem, all of us need to put a lot of energy, and synchronize, the way we are working. I really like the previous presentation, because it is the CHRO's role actually to synchronize everything. The CHRO should study the future requirement of the skilling, because technology disruption is happening so fast that I think in one of the study I read, 46% of the job roles will not exist by 2022. So are we ready?
Absolutely. So Devendra, let me come back to you for a second. See, when we say there is a lot of change in the environment, etc., and you are in the front line, you have dozens of customers who come to you with their problem statements. You really don't, not many will come to you with solutions, but they will come to you with problems really. And so you and your leadership team have to sit down over there and say that, how can I predict what problems are likely to come tomorrow, so that you can prepare your teams to be effective and ready for the problems that are coming in tomorrow. So, are there thoughts that leadership, goes through, or programs that leadership goes through, etc., to make those assessments of what is the competency that the tomorrow's world is likely to, demand, and how to prepare for that today, like make or buy decision or any such thing. So, just pick your brain on that, please.
Yeah, the point that you raised is important, and I'm talking more in specific to the outsourcing industry, because that's the industry I know the best, and talking about that. See, the industry has moved from efficiency, effectiveness, and is now into experience and emotional connect. Because if you don't have this experience and emotional connect, you can never realize what the problems of tomorrow are there. And that is also what Mr. Purang also talked about in the last presentation. Now, how do you actually find out what is the experience issue and what are the emotional issues which are facing the customers, and how do you really empathize around that? There are techniques which are available like design thinking, which really puts you into the shoes of the customers and really understand what the customer is going through. And then how do you, understanding, or how do you distill that knowledge into making something that is something a lesson plan, a learning plan for the organization, and how do you push it down to the people, saying that this is what is really required for tomorrow, and how do you do it? That is really the question which is facing. The other aspect which I have seen over the years, and today the world, always likes, the people in the world always like to see things in black and white, haves and have-nots. So Beatles made this song very popular, no? The people in the world, haves, the have-nots. Then it became the people who are connected and not connected. The digital divide. That was the second part. Today there's a third divide in the world. The people who are willing to learn and the people who are not willing to learn.
Wow.
So that's the biggest divide which is there for the next 50 years. Willingness, not willingness. The issue is not what do you have to learn. The issue is, do you have the willingness to learn, and how do you ensure that you have the right kind of motivation to learn, so that you really skill yourself as an individual, and then at a global level, at an organization, to deliver what is really required.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. The willingness to learn is also a very important competency that needs to be built and developed in the leaders of the future, because you're right, you really cannot necessarily predict the future so accurately right now, but do you have the willingness to be an agile organization and agile group of people to learn as it comes by? I'll spend a minute on this make or buy thing. So when you as an organization have this question mark about how should you fill a gap, what processes would you follow to take this decision about make or buy? Do you hire people straight out from the people from the market, or do you spend time, invest in your own people to sort of upskill themselves? How do you take the decision? I don't want you to tell me what decision you take, but how do you take the decision?
See, the starting position which any person in HR has, the starting position that train my people, at least I'm doing well for them. That's what my heart says. We are HR, right? So, if we don't have that emotional connect and we invest in our people, how do we ensure that, our people grow in the organization? Exactly the point all of us face in HR. But, there are practicalities. There are certain skills which are not available. And you might not require them in, within the organization, and you might not be able to train or build up that expertise on a short period of time. Then you go around hiring them. Once you hire them, you try to understand how did they get skilled, and try to take those processes from there and try to make it into a larger part of the organization. How do you, convert that into a larger scheme of training and development? Once you get that understanding of, what is there, then of course there is an aspect of investments, that, how much does it make sense to train people, or is it better to continue to buy outside? What is the hiring premium that I'm paying? That is the other question. And finally, do you require that skill for a larger period of time, and in sufficient volume, or do you require it for a shorter period of time? And then the life of that super temp is now actually coming into the picture. So there are certain skills which are available, and it might be available, in certain organizations such as, let's say, RvaluE, which are not available with Infosys, but we might require them for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And do we really need to break our heads in trying to get them on a continuous basis, or do we get it on a short-term basis? I think these are the considerations which come in when we do the make and buy decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't I just sort of for a minute ask people here, they're super experts sitting right here in the of what's left. Anybody wants to share how you take these decisions within your organization? Imagine you're sitting there and the business comes up and says, I think this is what we need to do, and between the business and you take a decision that, there are these 5 things that we need to do for the future. A couple of them is, I want to improve my bank of available competencies under this particular field. What would you as an HR head do, or a business head, what would you do? Anybody wants to share anything from within their experiences? Sorry, can I have a request for a mic over in the center, please? Yeah.
So this relates to one of my past experiences. In a particular business line, the customers were looking at a particular skill set. Now that particular skill set is so niche that it is not easily available in the market. So we know that the talent pool is very, very limited. So we had to look at how do we engage these people even in a part-time basis. Because what the customer was bothered was not whether he is in your roles or what is he doing. He was not bothered about your attachment or your structure. He was bothered about the output. So in that particular stream, we looked at people who can also work for us part-time as a consultant, or like gig workers basically, right? Who are like, workforce of one, if you may want to call it, because they are consulting in the morning for some other organization, in the afternoon for a second company, in the evening they are doing business with you. And like he said, it can be for a very short period of time to a long period of time. So those are the ways in which, and again, this happened in a Fortune 250 company, which has got a 155-year legacy. Now that's a huge mindset shift, because from a policy perspective, to enable all of that is not easy to kind of make it happen. But then HR has to reflect it straight on the face of the leadership and say, this is the only way to do it, or there is no way to do it, because the talent pool is so small.
Yeah.
And you can't build this talent pool overnight.
Yeah.
Right?
And you don't need it for a long period of time,
correct.
like you very rightly said.
Correct. And in another instance, what we did is we found 2 business lines which are constantly shrinking in the last 2 years, okay, tapering off. And on the other side, we are looking as an organization to see how we can, move up the value chain. So what we did is we did a predictive modeling to see like how this will taper off in the next 2 years. Look at a kind of people with a relative background in terms of the new competencies that we want to look at, and then focus on the skill building process 2 years in advance, and then move them batch by batch. And we upsold these solutions to the customer, and the customer was willing to kind of like, buy that solution from us. So like this is one way of staying ahead of the competition, and also ensuring that you're not getting to kind of lose those people or think about like what you will do with them. Because on one side, their current skills are obsolete, and on the other side, you don't have people from the market to fill those positions for you.
Well, very good. Any other person like to share something? Sorry, Srini.
Yeah, I'm just using some of my past experience again. One of the things that I saw was when you talk about training and skill building for people, usually managers tend to look at training for some problem that they're facing right now, right? But if you say, there are some aspirational training programs, or there is some skills for the future, people are not, especially I'm talking about say BPOs or even in GIC, they say, yeah, it's not relevant for us. So why should I lose my productivity or my revenue by sending him for training which I don't need right now? So to say that, we are organizationally looking at future roles, I think there is something lacking here within us. We still are not ready for it. Just a touch the thought
You're right,
process.
absolutely. So one of the problems that we face in organizations is that if you're just going to send people out for training, there are a zillion different training kinds of training programs you can send them out to, of which 999 billion and 999 million out of that are never going to be used. So there is no use sending people out merely because you need to train them. And the whole idea is, if you can make some kind of an accurate prediction of what trainings will help you in the future, that's when you can concentrate. Otherwise, if you remain with that, the training will be exactly what Praveen mentioned. He said, when the chips are down, the training budget is the first to get cut, and if you're going to remain that only. The point is that can you make that into a critical element in the entire strategy of the organization. Let me come to you, Nikhil.
Can I add to the previous point?
Yeah, sure.
So very interestingly, because so we are an education institute, so we keep on meeting a lot of interesting consultants in the market, and with the new disruption in the market, we have I personally have met so many people who are multi-talented, and they work 3 jobs in a month. 3 jobs means 4 hours every day for one particular organization, because that's the niche market they are working in. So for them, they are getting 3 type of salaries. So if, because all of you are HR guys, if we can actually, identify the right talent for your organization, that person can actually work for you 4 hours every day, something like that. That's the new thing which I have observed in the market. So, Sanjay, you were talking about make or buy. I think this is a new dimension where you don't have to make, you can buy for a limited time, as this gentleman shared, that, they offered someone for that particular short duration. So there is if your talent, if your talent acquisition is very strong, please focus on this aspect also. Yeah.
No, true. See, I think, again, I keep getting confused with this entire issue, because while we have a very clear understanding if the skills are very niche, and it's very difficult to hire people, and you don't need the people for a long period of time, etc. But those examples are far and few. Most often what happens is that just because you need a new client coming in, in BPO, for example, this happens a lot. There's a new client you've got. So what do? You say, you know what, I will post 30% of the strength from my existing teams to you so that they have some experience, etc. I'll buy 70% from new hires from outside. And this is the kind of a thing which happens all the time. But how did you come to that 30-70 in the first place? And with 70 that you're going to hire, they're going to be different skills, etc. Why not the entire 100 from inside? Why only, some from outside, some from inside, etc. That's where the problem actually comes. And say, we don't really know whether it's best to hire or best to retrain. So you try and do both, 70-30, 50-50, that kind of thing. Yes, sorry, sir. You have a view? Mic here, please.
I think it's a very important topic, so I thought I will share 1 or 2 elements. One of the things which is happening globally today is what people call as talent exchange, where organizations send their people to another organization, make them spend 3 months, 6 months there. Like, give an example. I know of a clear case, Procter & Gamble sent their people, because they wanted people to understand the advanced technology. It was not available. Nobody was there to get hired. So what they said was, these people are very good. I will deploy them on a talent exchange, spend 3 to 6 months in Google, and they will come back and take on different roles. It happened in global, even in India. I've seen Hindustan, India, we were doing it. So today, one of the things in terms of make or buy, it is eventually make, but how do you make it?
Fantastic.
Are you going to make it just because from within? No, it's not possible. You have to have a collaborative view of a very different nature. So this is an example I wanted to kind of share.
And, absolutely, Ravi. And the surprising part in this is that Google agreed to it.
Yeah.
And Google said, yes, we are willing to take in Procter & Gamble guys.
Yes, absolutely.
And put them in live business, not in training.
And this was initiated by the global business services of Procter & Gamble. It was not done by the company. Because they were so much focused on the business that they said, if I have to look at contributing to the end goal of the organization, I need to skill ourselves up today for tomorrow.
And from an exchange point of view, they probably may have gotten a few Google employees
Yeah.
to work on PNG systems so that they can also get experience on how businesses are working.
You touched upon it. Actually, this is a past experience, but I would like to share that. I'm just taking a manufacturing example, a little late, but I think even today we have seen this to the point you talked about. The manufacturing companies had the greatest understanding of Six Sigma. We haven't talked today morning about work study, right? Some of the best practices of trying to look at talent and training is all available in the manufacturing arena. If the service industry can shift and look at what manufacturing is doing, the whole world will happen. Like when we started American Express, there was no Six Sigma, right? So at that time, having come from a TQM company, I knew that this is a way to do what we need to do in terms of quality and Six Sigma. So we could bring in that to the extent we talked about not just-in-time materials, but just-in-time accounting. Okay. How can entries hit the account straight? That's what just-in-time is all about. But today, you are absolutely right that the same exchange happened because the exponential technology usage, Google wanted to leverage Procter & Gamble. Right? So it was an exchange which actually happened.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Deepak? Quick one.
You talked about BPM example. So one example I can share with you that there was this order we took, and we were supposed to hire and train and put people on production within 4 months, around 600 odd people. And within the organization, that skill set was not available. So, and hiring 600 was also difficult. So the combination of decision was taken that, and there was a pressure, and there were competitors willing to grab that business if we can't deliver.
Can't provide it.
So there was pool of talent available within which could be trained, and 25-30% odd people were hired from, so bought over, and then with everybody we got 5 to 6 people aligned and then scaled up the business as compared to a competitor which was expert in that business. And finally, after 4 months when we launched it, we performed at par or better sometimes. So that combination of make and buy or and make within this decision was taken.
Obviously there'll be combinations.
It also reminds me of one more interesting example. I was in discussion with the Dean of National University of Singapore. So look at the disruption happening in the education side, and it is so relevant for all the HR heads here. Now, they are going for a case study. They are going for a case study where they will be shifting the entire batch of their postgraduate students to Alibaba. And from there, these guys will be graduating, will be doing their post-graduation. They will not be in NUS. They will be, getting all kind of training, whether it is technical or managerial training, all kind of training from National University, from Alibaba. So look at the collaboration which is happening. So I think, so please, I have heard this, in India, some of the Japanese companies, they have started doing this. My suggestion to you is that please reach out to the educational institute. You have a future. You can actually, take the help of educational institute to, run an entire batch for your organization and take help from them.
That brings me to a very interesting element, Nikhil, which I've been wanting to sort of bounce off you, is, academia has a responsibility towards ensuring that the future is well thought of and prepared for now. So, you representing a very prominent institute who's doing a lot of research and stellar work, especially in terms of skilling and building competency frameworks, etc. How do you see, this as a role? And I'm sure there's some very interesting experiences that you can share.
Yeah. So, last year we got the license from government of Japan, so, as an authorizing person to or body to send skilled manpower to Japan, and for 1 year. So even in the last 1 year, we have not sent even a single person to Japan. Because I spent 6 months in Japan, and I try to understand the culture, management philosophies, what they follow, how they follow, how do they, how do they create, so Japan is famous for lifelong services in one organization, you should know this, all right, so how do they build this? So over a period of time, in the last 1 year, we have now, finally designed a program, to skill the manpower of India, where we are not only talking about technical skills, we are talking about management philosophies, old management philosophy of Japan, culture of Japan, like Monozukuri, Ikigai. So besides Kaizen, 5S, which are very used, you might have heard if you are from manufacturing side. But all these philosophies are very, very important to understand if you want to, stay in an organization. So the first requirement from Japanese side to Indian side is that I want your employee to retire from my company. So, on a personal note, they said at least they should spend 20 years. Okay. So we are building that. So I think my suggestion to, the audience and to everyone is that, when you are hiring someone, look at your induction process. It is worth investing, 20, 30 days of induction program. I know it is a cost, but trust me, it will serve you long. Before joining the institute, I worked in a financial sector. I spent 10 years because my induction program was for 24 days. Trust me, it helps. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. There is one more aspect to this which I now again open up to the people in the floor here. This is about building competencies and not, now I'm making a distinction between competencies and skills. I'm saying building competencies is as important as building skills. While we talk about reskilling all the time, it's not the same thing as building competencies. Reskilling is a skill, and you can say, skill will, etc. And say if you have the will, you can rebuild the skill. But I think building competencies has got nothing to do with will. Building competencies is the ability of that individual to be able to do something from a skill. But if you don't have the competency, a very simple example is that if you ask me to get into nuclear science, I just don't have the ability. Or for that matter, let me give you a different example. You ask me to, do a wall painting. I'm a totally right-brained, left-brained person. I cannot do a wall painting. It's just not possible for me. So I lack the competency of that artistic need, etc. And you cannot necessarily, induce that or build that. I'll be using my left brain to do a right brain activity. So, and this is an extreme example, but not necessarily true in the industry. So I'd like to check whether any of you have experiences, and feel free to jump in at any time, both of you, on building competencies, which I think is a more important aspect of business than building skills. Because I think skills reskilling and solutions are possible, but building competencies, we were talking about Philippines and so many other kind of things. At the end of the day, we had to send people from here to head Philippine centers. What a waste. But they were unable to find people who had enough people. There is obviously something there. So anybody wants to share anything on competency specifically as opposed to skilling? And then of course I'll give you a few examples. Anybody? Any experiences on competency building? I could tell.
In my previous organization in Nokia, we used to have project team. So when we were rolling out 2G, 3G and all that, so project team was one of the, important team. And when we go by the project, management, so there are 9 principles, which they have to follow, which they have to actually undergo. But we as an organization felt that, the project team does not have that set of competence. We did the analysis, we had that spider graph wherein we took that, global benchmark and compared within the organization, what they are doing after taking the interviews and everything. And then later on, we as an organization thought that we should...
Consistent, I realized that accountancy is not in my blood. I just don't do it as a part of my natural being. So what do I do as a part of my natural being was very different from just doing accounting. And therefore, very early in my career, well, very early is a relative term, but early enough in my career, I actually made that switch. And the realization that skill and competency are completely different things, it came pretty early to me. So I know exactly what you're talking about and saying, was my job wrong? Not necessarily, but that was not where my heart was. So time's up. There was a little, but I'll allow both of you to give any last conversation, any last views that you may have.
I wanted to respond to her. I think you raised a very good point. So just, I just wanted to give a short answer that you might do a lot of, management books today say that, do what your heart says and stuff like that. That's very good. But if you don't do something which is against your grain, you can never develop. It's like going to the gym. You can't build your muscles without going to the gym. You have to do against your grain. But then you have to realize that, my heart is there. But you have to go against the grain. So you must tell those guys that, look, I know you're very good at content, but you please do client servicing because it will make you a better content guy. Not because you want to make your life in content, in client servicing, but because you should be a better content guy.
Great perspective.
Yeah, and so your question on competencies, I think we have worked with many organizations, and we have only found those organizations where the vision of senior management is good. There the competencies are being focused on. Otherwise, people, senior management not aligning to any vision to build competencies. So that's one point. So I know time is up, ma'am, and just to quick add to your point, it needs a spine to stand up as a HR person and say that you are on the wrong place, man. You go either shift to that place or move out. So I think I think all HR guys should have a spine in place. Yeah, thanks.
Maybe that's the reason I'm standing.
Correct.
I prefer to stand. Thank you very much for joining me, both gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being a fantastic audience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting and interactive. Just a moment, please. Please stay. May I request Mr. Prakash Sinha, Assistant Vice President and Head, HR Shared Services Center of JSPL, to come up to give a memento to Deependra Mathur. May I call on stage Lionel Paul David, Head of HR, Olam GBS, to please come here to give a memento to Professor Nikhil Singh. And Anshu Goswami, AGM HR Talent Management VMart, to give a memento to the moderator Sanjay Gupta. No? So, Rakesh Sinha.
Stopgap for everything.
Fall back. Fall back.